watching, and thank you again for purchasing the DVD or downloading it. I want to welcome you guys to part 4 of PreparingForMeduNeterVol4, Preparing for PreparingForMeduNeterVol4, and we're going to really get into the history of the Egyptian text and the decipherment of the PreparingForMeduNeterVol4, because this is something that a lot of people have been asking questions about, and it's only fitting that we get into it in part 4 because I feel like you guys didn't get a true PreparingForMeduNeterVol3 was basically a continuation of part 5 of Saturn Satan. So this is where I was going to put the actual hieroglyphics and understanding them, but I think that it's needed that we go into the history of the text and everything that it pertains to, so you can get a clear understanding of PreparingForMeduNeterVol4 and the fact that it was deciphered and why there is an issue with that. So it's a huge issue with it lately, I have seen. But we're going to get into that, and we got a lot to get into, so let's begin. Okay, so for years, of course, we have been wondering about the decipherment of the Egyptian hieroglyphics. You know, can we trust the translation? Is the translation correct? And there has been an ongoing debate, not just recently, but, you know, for centuries, about the decipherment of the Egyptian hieroglyphics. And that's due to the fact that a lot of people don't dig really deep into the subject. Those who are in the know already understand what's going on and know what books prove their points. Now, the issue with us in the Black community is, of course, you know, we in the conscious community, we are not willing to accept a lot of books that's coming from Europeans. We already know when you provide a source that comes from a European or white person, a lot of people say, well, where did your source come from? And then when you say European, a lot of people don't want to really accept it. People only tend to want to accept European books in the conscious community when it fits their argument. So this is something we have to deal with. But, when you look at the history, of course, of the Europeans destroying history and changing history, then of course it's okay. It's with good reason for some people to be skeptical about the information that Europeans put out, and a lot of people just prefer for an African researcher or author to have written the source. Again, if you're doing research, this is what research is all about. If you're doing research, then it doesn't really matter who wrote the book, because in your research you will figure out what's true and what's not true. That's why you keep going. You don't just accept the books that you read. And most books, they will put their sources in the back of the book, so you can go to those sources as well. So you come to a point where things make sense and it fit, and then you have to either accept that or not. So now when we look at Champollion and the whole decipherment of the Rosetta Stone, which is basically what they tell us is how they was able to crack the code of the Egyptian hieroglyphics. And just right off the bat, anybody who really is into Kemet, your spidey senses should be tingling, because it doesn't fit. Something doesn't fit about all that, and we're going to get into it. But you can be skeptical about the translation and everything that the Europeans had to say about the decipherment of the Egyptian hieroglyphics, but then you have to still really ask yourself and look at the African scholars and Black scholars who have also followed PreparingForMeduNeterVol4 and have studied PreparingForMeduNeterVol4 and has said that it has been deciphered. You have to ask yourself, do you then trust them to have did their own research at some point to figure out what they are reading is true? Is the hieroglyphics deciphered? Do we know what it's talking about, what it's referring to, and what have you? So this is something you have to ask yourself and figure out, can you accept the Europeans' documents and what they're saying as far as the translation? And, can you accept the fact that, there have been African scholars who have did their own work, and trust that they have done their own research, and understand that the fact that they are following certain documents is because they have done their own research. So now when you start digging into this whole thing about the Rosetta Stone, you'll find out that the Rosetta Stone was found in the Nile Delta in a city called Rajid in Arabic, or Rossetti or Rosetta in French. It was found by one of Napoleon's soldiers. It was getting ready to be used in a rebuilding of Fort Julian, which was built and controlled by the Ottoman Empire until Napoleon came and took it over. So, it's a good thing they figured out it was something worth saving because it was getting ready to be used for scraps. But the Rosetta Stone, basically, it contains the 3 texts. We know the top text, ancient Egyptian, the middle text is Demotic, the bottom is ancient Greek. I know you guys know this stuff already, but I want to get into it for people who don't know about the Rosetta Stone, because there's a lot to it, a lot more to it, that I have to explain. But, it has these 3 sets of texts, and this is the issue. You have, as I said, you have the ancient Egyptian. It's not complete, by the way. The stone should be a lot bigger than what it is. It's broken, obviously. It's chipped in places. But the top text is ancient Egyptian, the middle is Demotic, and the bottom is ancient Greek. And, the whole part about deciphering it was first trying to understand that all 3 sets of texts say the exact same thing. Now, Champollion is given the credit for deciphering the Rosetta Stone, but there's a lot of people who worked on it before he came along and basically, finished the thing off. The Rosetta Stone is basically talking about Ptolemy IV is talking about Ptolemy V and how he should be celebrated for his work and stuff like that. This is what the stone is talking about. Now, the whole issue is, of course, as I said, is trying to figure out, was the Greek talking about the same thing as the Demotic and the ancient Egyptian? And once they figured out it's talking about the same thing, now the whole problem was deciphering it, like figuring out how to match up the words, the corresponding words from Greek, which they already knew, the ancient Greek, the Demotic, which they was having trouble with, and of course, the ancient Egyptian, which they claimed they had no clue how to decipher it. So Champollion basically deciphered the name Ptolemy from the Demotic text, and he did so using the Egyptian cartouche. And he determined that the phonetic properties of the Demotic text corresponds with the Egyptian hieroglyphics. So Demotic text is basically like the common language in Kemet. It was like a common language, according to Herodotus, who basically gave it that name. So you have Demotic, and before Demotic, you had the hieratic hieroglyphics. And a hieratic is basically like the priestly text, the priestly writings. It was what they used when they had to write a whole lot. So basically, if you had to write a 2-page letter, if you use hieroglyphics only, then it would take a long time, because hieroglyphics is basically really detailed. You got to draw stuff out. So hieratic was basically developed alongside of hieroglyphics, in case you had to write stuff like really, really long and put in document form. So this is what the priests use. They use a reed brush when they wrote in hieratic. It's that writing tool you see Thoth always had, a little pen he has when he writes. So you have the Demotic, you have the hieratic, and then you have cursive hieroglyphics. And cursive hieroglyphics is basically like what they use when they had to write like books or religious documents. And it's when you had to do like a huge, large work, but it had to basically be in hieroglyphic form almost. So it's like a dumbed down version of hieroglyphics. When you look at it, you can see it's not as detailed as hieroglyphics. But they used it, when they had to write books and things like that. It had to be in the papyrus of Anu. It's written in cursive hieroglyphics, so to speak. So, you have the Demotic, you have the hieratic, you have cursive hieroglyphics. And then you get to regular hieroglyphics, and then you can go further than that, actually. You got regular hieroglyphics, you can get into the New Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and Old Kingdom hieroglyphics, because they did things a little bit, different each time. So when you start getting into the writings of the ancient Egyptians, you start getting into the language and everything like that, it goes back. It's a lot that you have to deal with, that you can't just, look at a Rosetta Stone and decipher. We're talking about thousands of years of writing and language. So Champollion looked at the Rosetta Stone. He could see the ancient Egyptian, you could see the ancient Greek, and you have the Demotic, which they knew was a Egyptian language that they actually spoke in Egypt. But we also know that Coptic came from Demotic, and Coptic was the last language that they spoke in Kemet before the Arabs came and basically took Kemet away from the Romans. Coptic was the language that they used, and Coptic basically has borrowed words from Greek. It is also similar in its alphabet to the Greek alphabet. So, again, the thing is, we always talk about how they stole our language. Then, this goes back all the way to ancient Kemet, where we know for sure that Coptic is basically like a Christian language. It's basically, it's made for Christianity, and they created it and forced it on the Egyptians to basically get rid of the Demotic language and to really instill Christianity in them. And we're going to see that a lot as we go through in this video, how Coptic was basically the language that came along and to try to basically hide Egyptian. Now, remember I said you have English was made for Christianity, Coptic as well, Arabic for the Quran, and Hebrew for Judaism, or what have you. These languages is created to cover up the true origins of the people and the religion itself. When you really get into it, it's there to cover it up. So understand, no matter what Champollion came up with, the problem is we are not going to know how the ancient Egyptian language actually sounds. How it sounds coming from them. So we can only speculate. We can only wonder. Is it close? So no matter how much they worked on the Rosetta Stone, no matter how much we talk about it now, we're not going to know 100% for sure. Is what we are pronouncing and believing is the Egyptian language actually the language? Did it actually sound this way? Are we pronouncing words correctly? And this is one of the dilemmas that we find and that Champollion found when he was going through this whole decipherment. Champollion deciphered the name Ptolemy first. So he found two symbols in the name Ptolemy that matched the name of Thutmose and Ramses. So now we know that, again, we're not going to know exactly how the Egyptian names sound. We're not going to know that. But we do know that the Coptic comes from Demotic. So Coptic, they understand. So if he can basically find the word in Coptic that corresponds or fits with ancient Greek, which they also understand, and that's on the Rosetta Stone, then that will help them to decipher the rest of the Rosetta Stone. Now, again, understand they already believe that it all says the same thing anyway. It's just written in different languages. But there's an opportunity now, since you have all this stuff in different languages, to basically break down exactly what the Egyptian hieroglyphics is saying. So if they can find in Coptic something that matches in ancient Greek, and then they will get the decipherment for the demonic and basically get the decipherment for the ancient Egyptian using these two symbols that he found in the name of Ptolemy, Thutmose, and Ramses. So let me explain a little bit more. Okay, so let me explain. These are basically the two symbols that Champollion seen, that he saw in the Ptolemy cartouche, and he saw in the name for Thutmose and Ramses as well. So it looks something like, and forgive my hieroglyphic style. What you have. So two symbols right here that he got the letters MS, or the M-I-S sound, or the Ms sound for Coptic. So you have this symbol, which is the two symbols, but you can also have, let me see, and if you can see that. And he got the MS sound from these glyphs. So we know in Coptic, he looked and seen that MS basically translate in Coptic as to give birth. This is why we put MS in front of the woman's name or MIS in front of the woman's name. And you get MS or MIS or MIS in Coptic. So we have MS or MIS means to give birth. And we have the word in English demise, which basically means, death. So he saw this in the Moses and Ramses, the mise or the mess or that sound. And he basically figured out that it's in Coptic. And he looked at it in ancient Greek, and he saw a group of words referring to birthday. So that gave him a connection that he had birthday, and he had a word, basically Egyptian word meaning to give birth, and he made a connection from the Coptic to the Demotic to the ancient Greek, and it helped him basically decipher the stone. Now, obviously, this wasn't the same for all of the hieroglyphics, but it helped him to decipher what Coptic couldn't. So now you also got to remember that a lot of people wrote about ancient Egypt. This is one of the reasons why we know, of course, a lot of the things to be true. Why I always rag on the Hebrews, because, so many people wrote about ancient Kemet. And you have, the same with almost every single civilization. People wrote about these civilizations because they went there, they explored, and when you go to a different civilization, you already know if you travel, when you go to like Aruba or Mexico, you know that this is totally different from where you come from. And it's something to talk about, and we post pictures today. So back then, of course, they wrote about and they talked about the different civilizations that they visited. So Kemet, of course, was written about a lot. And they already knew about some of the names of the pharaohs. They already knew about some of the customs and things like that. People like Herodotus, of course, they had access to those writings, Champollion and them, when they was doing this decipherment. So they had access to some stelas and some writings, and people already had like this basic understanding of some of the, let's just say, the myths or what have you of ancient Kemet. So it helped him in his decipherment. Now, some of the stuff, he used some of the stelas and some of the stuff that people provided, but a lot of things he just basically took back to Coptic since Coptic was working. So let me basically explain what he's seen. And you basically have, let's see. Forget my cartouche drawing, but you'll have this and so Champollion seen, okay, he looked at he said, you know what, this looks like a sun. And he said in Coptic, we know the sun is Ra or Ray. So you have Ra, and he said, you know what, this thing looks like an M. And you have Ra, M-E-S-E-S, which is Ramses. So Ra, Ramses, where they got, or Rametsu, is where they got it. And the thing is, when you see this, what you'll find out later is a lot of it is like abbreviation for the Greeks or the Romans. So sometimes when they did hieroglyphics, they didn't want to write the entire name, because we know Ramses' real name is like way longer than that. You need like 2 cartouches to get his name. So this is what they did. So another thing. You have, let's see. Okay, so another thing that Champollion seen, he remembered, as I said, they had writings from Herodotus and Diodorus or what have you to help them out in their decipherment. So you have the ibis right here. He's seen the ibis, and he said, you know what, I remember Herodotus said that Thoth basically gave them the writing system, and he was represented by an ibis. So when he seen the ibis, he had Thoth. And then you had Moses, M-S, M-E-S, or M-O-S. So when he seen this glyph, he put together Thoth Moses. And that's how you got the Moses name. Again, the whole thing is, you could say it's not the same translation, or it's incorrect, but when you put it together, it actually fits with who they are talking about, which is Moses. So it's a lot of different ways. When he went back and just simply used the Coptic, it was fitting with a lot of the things he was trying to decipher. So a lot of the cartouches and with a lot of the hieroglyphics, he just simply took it back to Coptic, or took it back to things that made sense. And this is like really clear, easy. You got Thoth, Moses. And when you look at the hieroglyph for Thoth, sometimes you see it going sideways and it looks basically just like that. So it's just some of the things that he used. Now, and again, obviously you can't do this with every single symbol, but it will help you to isolate some of the sounds, but it won't help you to basically decipher an entire wall of hieroglyphics. So that basically gives you like a little insight into what Champollion is talking about, and that it can't all possibly be true. You can't decipher all of those Egyptian texts using these methods, or just simply going back to Coptic. There has to be another way that you use, another thing that you use to help you decipher all of these Egyptian hieroglyphics. I mean, even going back to the hieratic and cursive hieroglyphics into the New Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, Old Kingdom, where they use different styles. And then you have to still differentiate from when the Romans was writing hieroglyphics and when the Greeks was writing hieroglyphics, in which case we see that if they didn't want to put Ramses' whole name up there, you see how they did it with the sun and, the way I showed you. And these cases, a lot of times, what we call like abbreviations, a lot of the times the abbreviations was done by the Greeks and the Romans, and it just took people a long time to figure out that this was the Romans and Greeks writing in hieroglyphics, and that they just abbreviated. So, with Champollion, you can't really go by everything he's talking about. What he really did was basically, kick in the door and leave it open for a lot of people to come in and correct some of his mistakes and basically help to really decipher the hieroglyphics. The problem is a lot of these people who came along later and was doing work, they are not recognized, they are not talked about. And then you have a lot of people like myself and many other scholars who basically did their own research because, listen, man, I'm going to tell you, if you get into this stuff, if you're really into it, and you're really into hieroglyphics and deciphering it and looking into the language, when you look at the excuse they give us from Champollion, it don't fit. It's just that simple. It's like, the stuff makes sense. The hieroglyphics, you see, well, wait a minute, what y'all saying fits. I mean, we can basically read this stuff, but the way they're telling us how they did it don't work. It don't fit. So they're leaving something out, and this is causing a huge problem for people who are now starting to come into this knowledge and start to do the research. And it will lead you to believe or not believe in Champollion, but it will lead you to basically question the whole process of reading, writing, and understanding hieroglyphics. So now here's the thing that we are forgetting about. A lot of people forget that. Remember, we know that the Greeks lived in Kemet. We know that they worked with the Egyptians. We know that they lived with the Egyptians. And we have to remember that, one, the Egyptians did not adopt any outside customs. And Herodotus attests to that fact, that the Egyptians wouldn't learn any other languages or anything like that. So we can assume that the Greeks also knew Demotic, and this is how they communicated with the Egyptians. They had to communicate some way, somehow, unless there was another language spoken that we don't know about, or Demotic is just a lower form spoken only by just the commoners in Kemet. That could be possible as well, but we have to assume that the Greeks had to know this language, and this was the way they was communicating. Now, again, Herodotus is the one who gave it the name Demotic. The Egyptians actually called the language Chit-Chat, which basically means writing for documents. So again, we're not going to know exactly how the language sounded, but it doesn't mean that the Egyptian hieroglyphics or the PreparingForMeduNeterVol4 was not deciphered. The simple fact that the Egyptians had a name for it gives us a clue that, this is either a lower form of writing or a lower form of communication developed probably just to communicate, to do business or what have you, and there was another language that was spoken. But again, it doesn't mean that the hieroglyphics wasn't figured out, or that they didn't correspond, the demonic, to fit with the actual hieroglyphics in order for it to be translated or deciphered. And this is something we're going to get into as we go along. So now, as I said in the beginning, I can understand why people are skeptical about the translation of the MeduNeter. As I said, when I first started studying this stuff, when I got into it, when I looked into the explanation for the decipherment of the Rosetta Stone and the Egyptian hieroglyphics, and I read about the whole story with Champollion, what I'm giving you right now, I said to myself, you know what, this is some bullshit. It's bullshit, because it just didn't fit, it didn't seem right, especially when you start getting into the Coptic part, because Coptic would not decipher the entire Egyptian hieroglyphics as I'm explaining here. And they're not really going to give you too much more information into what else Champollion used. So, of course, it's really suspect, it's skeptical. And we know that, these people lie. This is what they are doing. This is why a lot of people in the Kemetic community don't want to really deal with European writings and stuff like that, because we know they lie, and they damn sure not going to tell us the truth about something, especially if that truth is going to reveal African people to look smarter than what they have portrayed us. And this is basically the case in this whole thing with Champollion, as we're going to get into. But when you look at history, you still have to say to yourself, when you look at the history between the Greeks and the Egyptians, you have to say to yourself, of course, the MeduNeter was deciphered. Of course, the Greeks can read it, because, they would not have turned on the Egyptians. They wouldn't have set them up and turned on them if they couldn't read the glyphs. It don't make no sense. We know, again, Thales, we know Pythagoras, Plato, we know they studied in Kemet. I mean, look at all of the things that the Greeks and Romans was able to build, after conquest of Kemet. I mean, all of the structures, we know before Kemet fell, they didn't have none of these cities and everything like that. They didn't have the kind of architecture that they are known for when Egypt was in its heyday. We didn't see this kind of stuff until conquest. So, of course, Thales, Herodotus, Pythagoras, all these people who talk about, Greek and talk about Kemet, we know they went there, they studied. The knowledge and mathematics that they have is unbelievable. And they give openly the credit to Kemet and going there to study. So they would not have left, as I said before, all that gold, all them jewels, just the priceless artifacts that, they found later on in Kemet. They wouldn't have left all that stuff there if they didn't leave for something far more valuable that would basically have them set, forever. And they left with the knowledge and information that they used to build the empire that we still see in power today. So they had to, of course, decipher all this stuff and understand the Rosetta Stone. I mean, understand the language and everything like that. They had to. So we know what happened. After they got the information, after they basically didn't need Kemet no more, they decreed that, the temples was devil worship and it was demon worship. Anybody who go in there and start studying any of the Kemetic writings or what have you, it was considered to be demonic text or the demonic text or devil worship. And, the Pope closed the temples down, and basically they left Kemet to be buried, in the sand. So now understand, when they did find the Rosetta Stone, of course, the powers that be knew what it was. They knew how to translate it. They know how to read the demonic. They knew how to read the hieroglyphics. Now, if Champollion really wanted to decipher the Egyptian hieroglyphics, where should he have gone? He should have went straight to Nubia, to the Sudan. We know there they got the Meroitic script. And the Meroitic script was basically created from the Egyptian hieroglyphics. It was created between 750 and 300 BCE. Now, it's basically, this is during the Napatan period. And Napatan is basically when Napatan was one of the capitals of Kush. So the Napatan is talked about by a lot of Greek scholars. Diodorus talks about it, Herodotus talks about it, so they knew all about it. So when it was basically using the writings from Herodotus, because when you start getting into what Champollion used to do this decipherment, as I said before, they went to some of the writings of Herodotus and Diodorus and a lot of the Greek scholars and Plato and stuff like that to really try to get an understanding of the Egyptian texts and what have you. So he should have went to Nubia, because even then they knew about the Meroitic script. They knew all about it. And when you look here, we can see that they got the Meroitic Demotic script. They have the Meroitic hieroglyphics. This is not something that is new on the scene. They understood that a lot of the people fled from Kemet down into lower Africa, where all the war was going on. So they knew about these scripts, and they knew it was a possibility that either the entire Egyptian language survived somewhere else, or it at least evolved into different languages. Now, again, as I said, the powers that be can already decipher the hieroglyphics. They already knew how to read Medu Neter. Anybody who came along after that used African languages to decipher the Medu Neter. And this is what Champollion used. If Champollion wasn't an agent that was put in place to do this whole, press tidbit about the Rosetta Stone to just basically make them look smarter than what they are, then he used African text to decipher the Medu Neter, the Rosetta Stone, or what have you, because there's no way he could have just got the whole translation of all of the symbols and the Egyptian hieroglyphics using simply Coptic, which they try to lead you to believe. The problem is, of course, they don't want to give Kemet or give the African languages credit. Now, as I said, of course, the powers that be could read the Egyptian hieroglyphics. Anybody that tried to do a translation of the Egyptian hieroglyphics had to use African text, African writing to do the translation. There's no way Champollion could have got this whole entire translation done by simply using Coptic. And that's the issue. They don't want to give the credit to the African languages, because what you will find out is every single language that was used or derived from Egyptian hieroglyphics or a hieroglyphic style of writing was eventually replaced by Coptic. And this is why you see with the same thing with the Meroitic script, it was replaced by Coptic. And this is why what we see with Demotic, you have Coptic, and why you can use Coptic to basically go back and decipher Demotic, because they took a little piece of every language that they changed and kind of sort of put it into that group or that civilization style of Coptic. So you'll have a bunch of different civilizations that have Coptic, but depending on the language that it derived from or they took it from, some of the phonetic or phonemes or some of the little things about the dialect will be changed to fit that specific civilization. And this is what we find. So it's a lot of civilizations in Africa that basically had hieroglyphic styles of writing. So we look at Liberia, Cameroon, Nigeria, so many other places, Somalia as well, that basically had a hieroglyphic style of writing, and we see that most of these was basically changed or taken over and replaced with Coptic. So now you got to ask yourself a question, basically, what happened to the ancient Egyptians? And everybody always say that. Well, what happened to them? Where did they go? A lot of them did end up staying in Kemet, and we don't know how many. If you go to Kemet, you're going to see African people there. You don't know if they are natives of Kemet, that they evolved there and stayed there, which I doubt. But a lot of the people fled into lower Africa. We know they went into Nigeria. They went to the Gala people who they had a strong relationship with, or the Igala people. We know they went into Benin. They went into the Sudan. They went into a lot of different places in lower Africa where we still find remnants and artifacts of the ancient Egyptians. And they took the language with them, and the language evolved. Now, Champollion, or whoever did the decipherment of the Medu Neter that we have, that we look to today and read, whoever it is had to use African language to do the decipherment, period. There's no way around that. Or Champollion had to use it as well, or he is a fraud and probably was basically put there as a puppet to basically, kind of stir people away from the true decipherment or the real explanation of how they figured out the Rosetta Stone or figured out the decipherment of the metal netter. So he had to either be in on a whole big scam or use the African language and didn't want to basically report on it and tell where it came from to make itself look, smarter. There's no way in the world, as I said, that they deciphered it all using Coptic. It's just not possible, when you understand how this stuff works, that Coptic would basically account for the decipherment of the entire language. And this is what it seems like they're trying to project on people, that, the Christian Coptic can basically, reveal the text to the people. So when you start getting into it, we know they had to get certain dialects and tones and stuff from Africa, from these tribes, because we still find it to this day. When you start pronouncing some of the Egyptian words and how it sounds, if you go and then find it in an African civilization, what does that tell you? Now, to me, when I'm researching this stuff and when I hear people talking about the hieroglyphics, like I said, I can understand how people are skeptical about MeduNeter and, everything that involves the language as far as it pertains to Europeans. I understand how people are skeptical about it, how they can't really go along with what they are reading, because there are not a lot of books out there that a lot of people know about that's really getting into MeduNeter and the history of it. Because when something makes sense and it fits, you basically leave it alone. But it never dawned on a lot of people to basically question the decipherment of it, because it fits, it works. And this is something that I'm probably going to end up writing a book on, probably my third or fourth book. I'll probably get into this because there's so much more information than what's in here that will basically help a lot of people out down the line. Maybe books out that I don't know about that really go into what I'm going into here. But from our research, as I said, when you really get into something and you research stuff, what people are talking about, where they could have ran into a problem or an issue involving a subject because you came across the same thing in your research, which is why, as I always say, you don't stop at one source. You go to different sources and you try to figure out if the last source was true, or try to validate what the last source was talking about. So now we go to people like Sheikh Anta Diop, Ivan von Sertova, and you listen to a lot of these scholars when they talked about dealing with the MeduNeter and dealing with the Egyptian hieroglyphics and what have you. They talked about going into Nigeria, going into Benin and other countries in Africa to basically see how much of the actual tones, the language, had survived. And that's something that struck me a long time ago. And I was like, why would you go into Nigeria? Because they knew that, of course, the Egyptians fled south. They got out of Egypt and they fled into many different places. And they took the language with them, and it survived and developed into different languages. So when you research that, you run into a lot of different things I'm going to get into. Probably in the next part, we'll get into a lot more when we get into actual writing and stuff like that. I had to get through this because there's no way we can move forward without you understanding this right here, as you can understand. But this is what we find. Take a look. It says, traditions and linguistic evidences. Yoruba, Itakari, Igala or Gala are Egyptians, a proof of pure science. I'm going to read that again. Traditions and linguistic evidences. Yoruba, Itakari, Igala or Gala are Egyptians. That is amazing right there. And you're going to see this a lot more when you start digging into the subject, because there's a lot of people who've been trying to point out for years that, well, wait a minute, we have found the ancient Egyptians. We found the people. We found where they went. We found where they settled there, where they fled to. And you're not going to see a lot of traction for that. This is something they want to cover up. It's something they don't want people to understand and know, because, of course, who the Egyptians was and the claim that they have to Kemet and the claim that they have to all this information that these Europeans and the powers that be have been using basically to control everything. If these people came out and can basically reclaim their birthright and reclaim Kemet and have the knowledge to back it up, which when you start getting to some of the evidence, they almost can. But they of course want to suppress that. So when you get into this thing, I highlighted this part right here because I want you to read and see, some of the people who they mentioned as being the top dogs in this field of research. And you can see here, it's giving you some names, but right here it says Diop, and Sheikh Anta Diop is one of the people who really got into this stuff, and he is one of the best people in the study of Egypto-African linguistic relationships. Most African languages have a very short writing record. Despite this anomaly, they have a long oral history base in spite of their short written record. And, of course, remember, when we go back to ancient Kemet, we see that for a long time, it's no writing. Remember the Great Pyramid and stuff like that? There's no writing inside those pyramids. We get into the temples and the schools and everything like that, we start to find the writings in the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, and so on and so forth. So we know for a long time that, there was no writing and everything was done orally and there was no need to write. And you got to understand, when you really get into what you need to write something for, we write stuff to memorize it. Basically, if your memory is fresh, it's cool, you're not putting nothing in your body, you're going to remember everything that you learn. No need to write it down. Writing is sort of a form of, it's a primitive form. You shouldn't need to write. But we know why the Egyptians did it, because they understood the fall in consciousness and they wanted to put this stuff in stone. They put this stuff out there so in case they fell again or in case something happened with the civilization. But when you take a look at this research that they're doing here, we can see here it says, in comparing the genetic relationship of two distinct languages, the whole phylum, which phylum means a group of languages that's related to each other, rather than a single dialect, is considered. Despite the fact that our research was not able to reach all the Kemetic words, we are still able to get 123 words out of the 205 external syntactic symbols to be cognate between the Egyptians and Yoruboids, 59.6%, which is basically 60%. The meaning of it is that the present Yoruboid language is 60% the same as the ancient Egyptian language spoken 10,000 years BC. So they're basically saying it's the same language, and based on 123 words that they got in 205, which is 60%, they say it's basically the same. Beyond the Swadesh list, there are other scientific linguistic approaches to show the relatedness between the Itsekari or Yoruboid language with the ancient Egyptian. Charles Jor, a Hebrew scholar, has shown that when 3 out of the 5 sense organs of the peoples are similar or identical, there must be a point of contact in history between them. So you go down here, you start reading these. He's basically comparing the sounds from Egyptian and Itsekari and Yoruboid with they're comparing the languages together. I'm not going to read them all because it's crazy to pronounce. But basically he said, thus it's seen that all the 5 senses in Egypt and Itsekari are cognates. This goes even beyond Swadesh and deep into modern science. So basically, and this was a long report. I'm going to probably get into it in my book. I'm definitely going to do a book on this because it needs to be done from what I can see. Definitely going to get into this. So it's basically saying from this long report, when you go through it, they go matching the words up, all the words that he mentioned, and they get into the symbols and everything like that. And you basically can see from what they're telling us is that the dialects of these African tribes, these African civilizations, match up precisely with the Egyptian language, and that not just that possibly they sound alike. So we can possibly, that's what I'm saying, we're not going to know what the Egyptians actually sound like, but possibly from looking at these Africans and the way they pronounce these words, there's a strong possibility that it sounds exactly the same as the ancient Egyptians. I don't know how many scholars have told you guys, basically, when they was deciphering or going through their teachings about the Egyptian hieroglyphics, those who learned from Africans basically really was explaining that the dialects can still be found today in Africa and a lot of African civilizations. That a lot of the tones and the sounds that it makes comes from Kemet and still can be found today in Africa. So again, this means, as I said, when you understand how it works, it's no way that they did the actual translation of the Rosetta Stone or gave us all of these translations of the Medu Neter without going into Africa. And it's causing a lot of confusion because they are not explaining completely how they got this translation. They are using Champollion and just basically, as I said, trying to make it like, oh, Champollion deciphered it, and he's smart and all this and that, and just basically a white supremacist move to show that they figured out the Egyptian hieroglyphics, when that's bogus, when we know that the dialects and the language basically still exist in different forms in many civilizations in Africa. So it's causing the confusion because people don't know that and because they ain't put that out. So again, it's not that Champollion, he did decipher some and gave us, a hint, with the Coptic, as far as deciphering what we can decipher from the demonic text, because it goes back to, we know Coptic comes from demonic. But, we can see that people came along later and corrected his mistakes. So you look at this figure here, where it's talking about where he got RMS, that sound. And anybody who reads hieroglyphics, you already know where this comes from. It's basically part of the full name of Ramses. So when you have the RMS sound, he kind of isolated within the cartouche of where he got it. If you basically, read it's Rametsu Mariamin is what it says. But we know when you add the other cartouche to it, the full name comes out, Ursama At-Ra, Septepin Ra, and you have the Rametsu Mariamin, which he has. If you take that feather and you put it to the other side and get rid of everything else below the box that's under the waterline, that's Amen. That's the name for Amen. And we know that depending on what kingdom he was in, this is different depending on the kingdoms. And you also have to pay attention to if Greek wrote it or if a Roman wrote it, because they did things different. And this is what's causing a lot of the confusion. A lot of people look at the glyphs and it's really confusing, and it's hard to stick to a certain pattern of the actual translation of the Medu Neter, because you will look at one group of decipherments, if you want to do it as far as an A, B, C, D style, alphabetical style, and some people will have different symbols there for A and B and stuff like that. So it's tough. So what you do is, this is one of the reasons why I want to definitely do a book on this. What you should do is then, it's best to really get into this and understand the sounds that it's making, understand if it's coming from a African decipherment, or if it's coming from, the Coptic decipherment. And this will help you get a little bit more insight into who did the translation and where they derived their conclusions from. Because when you get into Diop's work, when you get into Ida von Sertova's work, when you get into Dr. Ben, when they're talking about the language and everything, they will tell you that we can find it in Kemet, and you can still hear the tones and the phonetic characteristics of the language. You can still find today in a lot of these civilizations. So when we get into it, of course, the Medu Neter has been translated. We wouldn't know about, what they thought about the dung beetle. Everything we know about the dung beetle and how it rolls the dung and about how it flies when the sun is hottest and about rebirth and everything that I talked about in the Medu Neter series and in the Saturn and Satan series, we wouldn't know all of this stuff if we didn't decipher the glyphs. We had to put this stuff together. And it's not like, they gave us a phony decipherment and it doesn't fit the actual hieroglyphics that we're seeing, because we can see how the dung beetle was revered. We know about Khepri. We know about the eternal use of the dung beetle, how it symbolized rebirth, how it symbolized basically immortality, because the dung beetle basically was a self-creator, just like the sun, as I explained, a self-creator. We wouldn't know all of this. I mean, everything fits. It's like, something is off. It's like seeing a magic trick. You know damn well he ain't cut that woman in half in that magic trick. You know it's a trick. but they keep trying to convince you that no, it's actual magic and he actually cut the woman in half. But you know it's somewhere around that, something that he did that you don't understand, and then you go out and you figure out how he did the trick. It's the same thing. When you look into the explanation about the Rosetta Stone and the decipherment of the metal nature, they don't fit. It's like something is off. You know, it's like, what is that? But then you can't put your finger on it because the script actually works. Like what they saying, and when you look at the metal nature and you read it, I mean, it fits. So it's like, well, there's no way he could have did this using Coptic and the means that they talk about, using the other stelas that he used. There's no way we can get these tones. We can figure this stuff out the way they told us. So when you go and you look into it, this is what you're going to find out, and there's a lot more into it. There's a lot more to it, but keeping it short and fast because there's a lot more we got to get into in the next series when we start getting to the writing. It's going to kind of piggyback off of this, but it's going to make stuff a little bit more understandable, and I'm not going to have time to get into it here because there's a lot to it, and it's going to take too much time. But we know it was deciphered. I couldn't get into the whole Waters of Noon. You walk into the Temple of Hathor, you look up and you see what's up there, and then when you correspond it with the actual ancient Egyptian creation story, and it fits. So when you read in those hieroglyphics and you look up and actually see, you know, it's on the ceiling. And it's up there for a reason because it's representing space. I mean, it's no way in the world we could know this stuff just without knowing mental nature, without piecing it together. We couldn't know what we know about, you know, quantum physics or what have you. Even Tesla, of course, as I mentioned before, many people have mentioned before, Tesla, of course, he understood it, which is why he came to the conclusion that he came as far as energy and what have you, electromagnetism and everything like that. The Egyptians put so much stuff out there, and there's no way we will be able to actually understand it if we never deciphered the glyphs. I mean, it would just be, we would be clueless. They would have never left the place alone. So the powers that be got the information, they got the knowledge, they understood how to decipher the glyphs, you know, over a couple thousand years ago, thousands of years ago. So they understood. The Greeks would not have left that place. The Romans would not have left if they did not decipher it. It's just that simple. It's just a question you got to ask yourself and realize what you are willing to accept and be comfortable with as far as going forward with studying ancient Egyptian culture. So I got a lot of questions about this information here in this DVD about the Rosetta Stone, about the true decipherment of mental nature, and for some reason a lot of people have been hitting me up about that. And I know I seen probably a few years ago a couple people was debating the hieroglyphics and whether Champollion really deciphered them, but they was debating it in the same context that I am, as far as there's no way they used the Coptic, and that, you know, they obviously had to understand and know that the hieroglyphics had to been deciphered in order for the Greeks to have the knowledge that they had. And the reason why I didn't get a lot of traction was because then it's going to call into question the validity of, you know, people like Plato and Pythagoras and all the mathematicians that that studied in Kemet, you know, even Da Vinci and everybody who got their information from the mystery schools and everything like that, because we know it all goes back to Kemet. And when you start tracing everything back there, and we know that the Greeks was in Kemet, then of course you're going to say, well, they had to know the language. So why is it that they acting like when they seen the Rosetta Stone, they couldn't decipher it, when clearly they had to decipher it to build what they built? And I guess you can say that a lot of information was lost during the Dark Ages. We know the Moors came and basically civilized the world, you know, during the Dark Ages, and we owe the Moors a lot of respect for that. But then that's another thing you have to look at, because, you know, depending on who you speak to, a lot of people say that the Moors came from Kemet, and this is what they fled basically Kemet during the wars, and they had the knowledge, and they basically developed into, you know, the Moors. And during the Dark Ages, they basically shared that information. So obviously they had to understand the mental nature and the hieroglyphics in order to do what they did. So even when you start getting into Champollion, when we talk about the 18th century or what have you, 17th century, 18th century, I believe it was, even still, I mean, right after that, when you get into 1776, when you just get into the building of Washington, D.C., and what Benjamin Banneker set up as far as the Masonic layout. I mean, we can see the Egyptian theme. We know that there were Freemasons, and we understand that the secret societies had, of course, they had to decipher the glyphs. They had to know it. They had to understand what this stuff was talking about, or what is the point of having a secret society that's basically based on ancient Egyptian mythology or culture or belief system. So it had to be done. So this is stuff that, we really got to look at as far as getting into this question. So at the end of the day, you have to basically figure out what you are comfortable with. If you're comfortable with going with Champollion's version of what Europeans are saying is the decipherment of the Metu Neter, or are you going to dig deeper and get into the decipherment of the Metu Neter as it pertains to African language and the the etymology of it, since you can see that the Meroitic script came from Egyptian hieroglyphics. You can see like these other scripts that have hieroglyphic structures. Then again, of course, you would have to give the credit to Kemet, because we know Kemet was there before any of these civilizations, and most likely the writing style probably came from there. So this is where we need to get into. So as far as the tones and the sounds, I mean, as long as you understand what the hieroglyphics is pertaining to, then, I mean, you basically got the decipherment. So, take it back to Romeo and Juliet. A rose by any other name would still smell as sweet. So it doesn't matter what we call it and how we pronounce it. What really matters is what it pertains to, and are we reading the hieroglyphics correctly, or the Metu Neter basically correctly. And yeah, a lot of people do get into sound because we know the power of sound, and it's supposed to be some power with pronouncing certain hymns of the Metu Neter. And this is why a lot of people are working hard to get the tones and the sounds precise. And this is why it's important that they go back to Kemet, go back into Africa, and go back into these civilizations and really study the culture and study the language and the tones that these people speak. Now, and again, of course, the reason why they're not going to put this out mainstream, the reason why Champollion will always be, because when you go and start doing the research, when you look into the explanation of how they deciphered the glyphs, and the Metu Neter is always going to show Champollion. It always shows him. He keeps showing up. And you got to look a little bit deeper to get a different explanation. And they're not going to, as I said, talk about that he had to use Africans, the language and the dialects from a lot of these African tribes to really get a true translation, to take a lot of these corresponding glyphs back, a lot of these corresponding words, even from a Demotic, to take it back into these African dialects. Because then again, you will have to then admit officially that Kemet is black, people are African, and we see how they try to cover that up. To me, the argument is dead just by going into Kush. When you go into Kush, you go into the Sudan, and you look at the glyphs that's still there in Kush, of the Kushite pharaohs or kings. We see clearly that we know Kush is all black, it's African, black people. So even still, we see the glyphs, the hieroglyphs that has black people, black faces. So it's one of the arguments that completely kills anybody's notion that Kemet was anything less than black. Just going there, why would they go there and rule? Why would they put the hieroglyphics in that color? And how come the people there are, African or black people? So again, the argument is absurd to people who really dig into ancient Egyptian customs and culture. And when you follow them through their ascension to the dynasties, we see where they come from and what they have been and what they describe themselves to be. But of course, they're going to cover that up and not ascribe the Meroitic texts and all these other texts and languages to these African people, because they don't want you to know about them. And it's going to be left up to us to put this stuff out and to tell our people in the world, where this stuff really comes from. Which is why, again, I'm definitely, probably my third or fourth book is going to be on all this stuff, because there's so much more into it. My first book, this book will definitely be out. It's scheduled to release the end of March, beginning of April. I will have a precise exact day pretty soon, and I'm going to let everybody know when it's going to come out, where they can get it. But, this getting into this again and doing this part 4 of the MeduNeter series. It's, it really getting back into this information really made me realize how much is still left out there on the table that we really got to get into. And I definitely want to put it into a book, because it's going to be one of those books that we need, that's going to bridge that gap between, understanding the hieroglyphics and the truth about them, and people who believe that, who have doubts as far as the glyphs. And then, people having doubts will be encouraged more to actually go along and pursue the actual decipherment. So when you start getting into the Rosetta Stone and understanding how Champollion's supposed to have deciphered it, we understand that, he spoke a lot of different languages. He actually did speak Ethiopian as well. So he knew about tones, he knew about African language. It's just the way that they explain it that makes it look suspect. Champollion could be completely justified in his translation of the Rosetta Stone. I know the man worked years. He worked really hard in deciphering it, and his knowledge of languages could have possibly contributed to him understanding and deciphering the Rosetta Stone. He's dead and gone, so it's the way they explain it now to us. It's just really suspect, but he could have done the translation possibly. But still, there's no way he could have done it without going back into these African languages, as I showed you how it matches up with the tones and the sounds and how it relates to the Egyptian language. And a lot of these African languages was derived from Egyptian hieroglyphics, or have a hieroglyphic style as well. So, the Rosetta Stone, some people believe it's fake, it was fabricated. And one of the things that show you that it's kind of not is because, I don't think a person would have knew, first of all, one, that demonic was used at a certain time only for trade use. Like demonic, I think early demonic was only for trade, and then it was later on it was used for like common use. So they date the Rosetta Stone around the time when it was used for common use, or official use for decrees and stuff like that. But then you have on the Rosetta Stone, it's actually a decree from Ptolemy IV about Ptolemy V, and how he's supposed to be celebrated for his work and everything like that. So that's actually a decree. So I doubt that the person who fabricated would have known that, or it just doesn't make sense to fabricate it. So, it fits as being an actual, piece of history, an actual artifact. So I'm not going to go that far and say that it's fake. But it's just, again, the way they explain it, and the way it's not really giving credit to the African languages as helping to decipher it, makes it suspect and confuses a lot of people. So what I tell people is to go ahead, dig deeper into that research and look deeper into exactly what was used to decipher the Rosetta Stone. Again, you can go by Champollion, you can go by Ivan von Sertero, or even Wallace Budds, and a lot of other people who get into the Rosetta Stone. But the bottom line is it has been deciphered. I mean, the rest of the stuff that people getting into it doesn't make too much sense to me. I can understand how people doubt it, and I put in this video why people doubt it, but I don't see no real reason why we should really not go with Champollion's decipherment, other than the way it's been expressed to us as far as how it was deciphered. There was not enough information given to us. And as I just showed you, the reason why, because then it would reveal how much African language was used, and how this stuff actually goes back to African language, and how, the Egyptians was black, and how they basically came out of Egypt into Kemet, and developed these languages out of Kemet into Lower Africa, like Nigeria, what have you, and developed these languages that I explained, and basically still exist. So, the descendants still exist. And we are the descendants. As I said, one of you could be a descendant of royalty, and who knows, with slavery and the way things happen, and how so many people was taken from Nigeria and sold into slavery. Who knows, how far back we go, or where we actually descend from. But, the explanation created a lot of issues as far as the research into the Rosetta Stone. I know I ran into it. I know some of you probably have as well, but this is why I wanted to make, it's only fitting that I make this one about the actual script. So when we start getting into the language itself and start going through the alphabet and the pronunciations and everything like that, it's for, pertaining to the hieroglyphics or the Metu-Neter, you get the understanding, like you understand that this stuff is right, it's real, it's rare. It all makes sense, it fits. As I said, we couldn't get the stuff that we know about the sun and its properties, about the dung beetle, about the attributes of the Egyptian gods or the Egyptian netters. I mean, just so much stuff that we couldn't know if it was never deciphered. So, not coming at nobody or not being trying to be a nuisance on the subject. It's just too many people. I've gotten so many questions. I mean, I probably got at least 100 from people asking that question about the Metu-Neter. Was it deciphered? I don't know where it started from, that whole thing. I know I ran into people debating about it years ago, but it's something that it's just crazy to think everything that you basically saying everything that we know about Kemet, everything that we embrace and love about Kemet is bullshit. It's all bullshit. Like, we don't know nothing. It's just we stupid, and what would be the point of somebody? I mean, it's too much trouble you would have to go through for what kind of gain? You get what I'm saying? Like, even if the powers that be didn't want us to know about Metu-Neter and stuff like that, they would have just destroyed everything and not said nothing about it. I mean, look, now you just have people coming into the knowledge of Kemet. And some of these people are in their 60s and 70s. You have within the last 20 years, people really just coming into knowledge of Kemet and really start getting into it. I mean, since if it wasn't for, like YouTube and social media, a lot of people wouldn't know none of this stuff. And if they wanted to keep it away from people and cover it up, they could have done it successfully with no problem. A lot of people have absolutely no clue, nor do they care about ancient Egypt. So I doubt, they would have done all this. It just, it don't fit. What does fit is the actual translations and everything that we know about it. Everything fits. And, when you get into it and read it, you see clearly that it all fits. So, yeah, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to get this understanding and supporting me and, getting the video or the DVD, download it or whatever. And, I'm here in my new location in Las Vegas until I'm finished this last little bit of school online. Then it's back to Kemet. I have some projects coming up, personal here, as well as, projects for YouTube and for DVD as well. But I really wanted to get into this topic because it's really going to be the bridge into the last two parts of this Metu-Neter series before we actually get into the Metu-Neter itself. And, I'm trying to hold back here because I don't want to reveal too much, before we actually get into the Metu-Neter, because, how we're going to start that thing going to be crazy. And I kind of sort of want to, start it, when I take the trip to Kemet and everything, I want to kind of start part 1 there. So I want to do a video there for part 1 of the actual Metu-Neter series when we actually get into it, so I can show you guys some stuff as well as finish part 6 of Saturn and Satan. So I'm trying to fit all that stuff together. But I'm here, I'm working on some stuff here. I have a plan, of course, got to go back to Sweden, as I said, and finish up my business there. But, I got with some people, excuse me, and I'm actually trying to develop like this, like housing, low-income housing for families, for, a full household family. So talk about mom, dad, kids. So there's something that I'm working on down the line. Like I'm going to probably do a video later on that I'm probably going to put on YouTube that's going to get into successful business ventures, like things people can get into to make money immediately or to invest their money in, because it's another thing that's needed. And I want to kind of break down some financial things to people on a level that they can understand, because this is another thing. I get that question a lot from people. Why don't get into anything business wise and stuff like that relates to here and now. and I'm definitely going to start going into that because I've had some successes in my life, investing in a few things, and in real estate, which anybody who really knows me knows that's my passion. That's my number one thing. I invest in real estate, and I've been doing it for a while. So it's things that people need to understand and learn that I want to talk about, and really I try to tell people without sounding like I'm bragging or condescending or anything like that. You got to know something. It's just that simple. You have to educate yourself. And people have these dreams and be wanting to do things in life and don't have the education to take them there. They don't have the know-how. And so a lot of times people want to piggyback and just, enjoy the ride to success while you do all the work. And I tell people, if you got a dream and you want to be successful, you have to know what you want to do. You can't just be saying to yourself that I want to get into whatever's going to make me money, because you might not be happy doing that. It's better, and you'll probably excel in it faster when you actually know what you want to do in life. When you have a passion for something and you stick to it and you ride with that. But then you have some people who just got a little bit of money and they want to know how to invest it. So these are things I want to get into. But ultimately, because I have a family member who was going through a problem that I just helped them out of as far as housing, I want to basically get some houses, some properties, and just set up a program to where we can help families, because a lot of times there's a lot of pressure on the man of the house to provide for his family, and Tupac said it best: it's hard to be legit and still pay the rent. And in this society, the way things go, it's hard for you to be successful and still take care of family and still feel like a man and be yourself when you're working a 9 to 5. So a lot of times people be needing help, and they be needing a place to live with a rent that they can actually afford without no bullshit from low income housing and the government or what have you. Now, you do have people who take advantage of the system, and this is something I'm going to prevent. But I want to, if I could, try to take out of the hands of the government, at least in Philly, where I'm from so far, low income housing, and try to create something that's going to help people as far as finding housing, for a full family. Because if we got to support the full family, we got to support a full household that has 2 parents, and we got to support them. We got to support them and keep that together. And I'm just going to work specifically with those kind of people, because when you see that, it's a rare thing nowadays to see a 2-parent household that's African American, and a lot of people are struggling. So I met some people, and we sat around and we talked about this, and like I said, I just helped a family member out of a situation. So I have some money. So I want to something I want to get into a little bit later on as I continue to do what I'm doing and finish building my success over there in Sweden. I want to definitely come back here and finish doing that. Like I said, I already got properties here that I own, and I want to definitely take this to a different level, because I see some, not just legal loopholes and financial loopholes that I could take advantage of, but I see a way to really help a lot of people out. And I'm going to get into, as I said, a video about business ventures that people should partake in and invest in and look into. It's not going to be nothing that's like some get rich quick scheme type shit. It's going to be something that you can actually research and look at and just think about as far as your future, and think about as far as investing that can help you build a little bit of money to help you move forward as far as what you want to do in life. So yeah, this is something I've been asked about, something that I've been wanting to talk about and get into. And definitely going to talk about this stuff and get into this stuff a little bit more, and just talk about some things that's out there for people to take advantage of business-wise to make some money. If you have a little bit, income tax time is here. A lot of people about to get a lot of money and they're about to piss it away, and they're going to be broken in a month or so. So a lot of times people don't realize 3 years that you got income tax money. Some of you could have had over $10,000 in that 3 years. Some of you could have had more than that, and that probably would have been enough for you to put a down payment or pay off a tax lien or get a tax lien. Is something I'm going to get into, is tax liens as well. Even though you can go online and look up that kind of information about tax liens, there's a lot of little things about it that they're probably not going to talk about online for free. They're probably going to want you to pay money for that. But if you don't know about tax liens, you can basically, go to your sheriff's office in your state and get a tax lien property. And what you do is you basically pay the back taxes on it, and there is an interest rate, that you're going to incur on that money. So once you pay off the lien, what happens is you become a co-owner of that property. So what happens is they notify the real owner of the property to let them know that, hey, you got to come and basically match this this buyer and pay this back taxes. And you better hurry up, because now it's incurring interest, and you're going to have to pay back that money plus the interest to this guy who just basically, to you or whoever the person is investing, they have to pay back interest on the money that you put up on the lien. So what happens is, if they basically come back and pay off the back taxes, then they pay it off. You get your money back plus the interest. So you do make some money on it as far as investing your money. Now, if they don't come back and get it by a certain time, you can go ahead and file to basically be the sole owner of their property, and then you can basically take full ownership of that property. So I've done it for years. So this is something that you can do. So, you do it, you rent it out, or you flip it and you make some money. That's was the last thing I was doing before I ended up moving to Sweden and everything like that. So, I'm going to break this down and get into this. And as I said, it's something that you can do at your own pace. Some of this stuff is costs a little bit of money to get into, and you can just go ahead and fix the place up, flip it, or rent it out, and just have money coming in or what have you. So there's a lot of things out there, because I keep seeing too many people stuck in work. 9 to 5 every day. You got to work, and it's crazy. Like I said, I got friends that we can't chill, we can't hang out because they got to be to work. I fly around a lot. I like to go a lot of different places, and sometimes people join, sometimes people who I want to come can't because they got to be to work. So it's frustrating. A lot of people as I said before, if you're not working to own your own business, what are you doing? If you're not working to eventually work for yourself, what's the point? You're going to be working for somebody you don't even know for the rest of your life, and you're going to retire with peanuts and be done wasted your whole life working for some other person when you could have worked for yourself. So I want to go ahead and basically educate people on what they can do as far as working for themselves. Sorry if you hear the dogs in the background. I don't know where that's coming from. But educate people on what they can do as far as working for themselves and what direction they should go, and how it's actually, if you want to get government grants and stuff, it's actually out there for you to get. It's actually money for you to get. Anybody who knows me, my real name is Grant. My last name is Grant. My real last name is Grant. I've gotten quite a few grants. When I started my recording studio, as I talked about in the music industry, I got grant money for that. So there's ways to get grant money. There's a lot of ways to get the finances that you need to take a step as far as becoming an entrepreneur or a business owner. And at the end of the day, it's just going to require effort for you to save money and to be serious about the situation and to sacrifice. Because if you're not willing to sacrifice, you're not going to get nowhere. And I'm going to get into all this in this. I might make it a series and just put it on YouTube and just get this information out there. So that's something definitely to look forward to. So in part 5, it's going to really intensify as far as the information I'm going to put out, because when you start getting into hieroglyphics and into understanding mental nature, it's just a lot of information you got to take in. And if you try to learn Egyptian hieroglyphics, it's frustrating. It's tough when you keep getting different interpretations of text and of glyphs and everything like that, which is why you gotta try to find the right books, which I'm going to recommend some books to you guys when we get into part 5, and show you some books that I have that I use when I was studying everything. I'm going to actually go through some of the stuff so I can point a couple things out to you so you can have a better understanding of what to look for and what they're going to be talking about. But I think by when we get through 5 and then the last part 6 of this series, the last 2, you're going to have a real good grip of the hieroglyphics and everything like that. So then when we get into part 1 of the actual MeduNeter, when I'm in Kemet, I can show you and start breaking stuff down. It's going to be a lot easy to compare it. Then, I mean, it's a lot to learn. There's no way I can put everything into these last 2 videos or into the entire MeduNeter series, but it's going to be enough for you to get the parts that's important, which is the spiritual part that the ancient Cometians was trying to communicate to us. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into everything. Y'all know how I do. I'm going to break it down. I'm going to do y'all right. I'm going to get y'all everything y'all need to understand and know, so y'all can really get this information, because it's going, how things are going to come together is unbelievable. So they left the stuff for a reason, and we're going to get into why, and they show you why. A lot of things is missing from Kemet. They cover it up a lot, but it's on paper. We got pictures. We still got stuff to prove, and as I said, I'm going to go in there and show you a couple things, and you know, it's going to kind of bring a lot of stuff together and get you a more clearer understanding of what the Egyptians was trying to convey before they was halted, you know, before they were stopped. So, you know, again, as I said, they left it up to us to go ahead and figure out the rest of it, to figure out the rest of what they were trying to teach and to take it to the next level. And we are so far behind as a people, like we don't even know. And a lot of people don't even acknowledge Kemet, and then, you know, some people don't even know where they come from. And you got people who African, living in Africa, have no idea about Egypt. And that was one of the things that blew me away. You know, shout out to everybody in Africa that's supported by the DVD. But a lot of people from Africa send me messages about they had no clue. You know, you hear things about Kemet, but a lot of them actually believe that belong to the Arabs. So, you know, the mind control, the manipulation that they have on the people. I mean, so many people in Africa turning to Christianity and Islam. I mean, it's crazy. And you see what they are doing to me, the most powerful people on the planet, which is the true, pure African. So yeah, it's deep. We're going to get into it. It's a lot more to come. But again, thank you guys for taking the time to watch and to purchase and to download. And, you know, this is the first DVD coming from this location, so a lot more to come before I switch locations again. As a matter of fact, when I do get back to Sweden, I'm actually going to probably rent out like studio space, like an actual, you know, studio, and have like way better, like a sound stage probably. I was already talking about it. Way more space to bring way better quality videos and to be able to do more things when I get over there, because it's a lot cheaper. So yeah, a lot more to come. As always, thank you for supporting, and yeah, see you guys next video.